The King of Fighters is a series long beloved by fighting game fans. It's consistently sported a colorful cast of memorable characters, flashy specials is satisfying to watch as they are to input successfully, and a high level of overall speed that sets itself apart not just from other team fighters, but the fighting game genre at large. Coming nearly 6 years after King of Fighters XIV stumbled through the noticeable growing pains inherent in the switch from 2D to 3D graphics, King of Fighters XV stands as proof that the series is starting to come into its stride after making the leap into the third dimension. As the third game in the Shun'ei Saga story arc, which started with the 14th entry and also includes the events of SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy, King of Fighters XV picks up an indeterminable amount of time after the defeat of Verse at the end of 14. The titular King of Fighters tournament is once again underway with the backing of a new sponsor, and all 39 characters have formed 13 teams of 3 to get in on the action. In full honesty, it's hard to imagine many people dropping full price on this game exclusively for the story elements. Even among fighting games as a whole, the amount of narrative content on offer here in the story mode, which has a lot more in common with an arcade mode, is on the sparser side, though that's not to say it's lacking in enjoyability or an ignorable aspect of the experience. Even if the gameplay is what you're probably there for, King of Fighters XV offers a plethora of specific character interactions between battles that reference the events of past games, and the individual team cutscenes do a lot to advance the larger storyline by priming character arcs for the next entry. It's exactly what you would expect from a KOF title, which is a drawback only in the sense that these are great characters, and it would be equally great to see more of them than we get to. It may not be the cutting edge of 2.5D graphics right now, but what the game lacks in graphical prowess more than makes up for in sheer style and artistic substance. On next-general hardware, it performs with unreal fluidity and smoothness, and it's just a joy to witness all the particle effects light up the various colorful stages. While the character models lack strong graphical detail, the character designs have never looked better and carry a strong anime flair with 2.5D finesse. It's just great to see so many familiar faces return for a new gaming generation, especially when the story mode has moments of random banter between them as an homage to their storied past. What bolsters the presentation to make the experience memorable is the music. The series has always featured some fantastic music, but the soundtrack of the King of Fighters XV might be the best produced. Sure, it has some modern rock tracks, and some of the vocal songs border on cringe, but the best parts are when the big band jazz kicks in to create a vibe and energy we rarely ever see in fighting games anymore. Not since the King of Fighters '96 has the music stood out on its own as it does here, and you can select from both modern and classic tunes from the digital jukebox. This will hardly surprise anyone, especially after a successful open beta period before launch. Still, the King of Fighters XV is the best the series has ever felt from a gameplay standpoint. It is as fluid and fast as a modern fighting game should be, yet it has some of the methodical weight of the earlier entries in the franchise. In addition, the characters offer a ton of gameplay variety, everything from grapplers like Shun'ei and Blue Mary to the stylistic combos of Kyo and Kula and even some of the old-school heavy hitters like Terry and Ryo. When it comes to its fighting system, the King of Fighters XV smartly builds upon the solid foundation of the previous game in incremental but meaningful ways. For example, the Shatter Strike mechanic adds another defensive tool to players' arsenal for starters. By pressing QCF along with hard punch and hard kick, you'll unleash a rapid counterattack that'll knock your opponent off their feet, buying you some breathing room or giving you the chance to take the offensive. However, Shatter Strike comes at the cost of a power gauge, so you'll want to use it strategically. Of course, Shatter Strikes aren't the only new addition to this fighter's formula. The rush combos introduced in the King of Fighters XIV are back, albeit with a twist. They function similarly to how they did in the previous game. By tapping light punch repeatedly, you'll still initiate an auto combo. But depending on how many power stocks you have in reserve, the fourth button input will end the combo in various ways. For example, if you press light kick for the final attack, you'll trigger a special move. But if you end it with a hard punch instead, you'll unleash a super special move. Lastly, ending your rush combo with a hard kick will execute a max super special move. By pressing light punch, you'll perform the most potent attack available depending on how many power stocks you have at your disposal. There's no denying rush combos were met with a mixed reception when KOF 14 launched in 2016, with many fans complaining that they dumbed down the proceedings. That said, many purists will probably take issue with how this installment makes them even more versatile than before. As for me, I don't mind them so much. They give fighting game novices a chance to dive in and have a good time. My only real complaint is that I've found it a little too easy to accidentally trigger a rush combo in the heat of a match, effectively pissing away all of my power stocks in the process. Other areas that have been retooled and refined are the max mode and max mode quick. The latter can now be activated even when attacks are blocked, giving you the chance to instantly combo into the next action so you can continue your offensive. Overall, everything comes together quite nicely. Sure, rush combos will probably remain a divisive feature among fans of the series. But as a whole, I feel SNK has done a solid job of introducing some fresh offensive and defensive mechanics into the mix to keep things interesting. Fortunately, King of Fighters XV is a very generous offering. On top of a decent number of game modes to choose from, there is also a huge roster of characters to get stuck into. Indeed, this probably an area where King of Fighters shines brighter than similar fighting games. The whole roster of characters are not only fun to use, but there's a ludicrous amount of variety to go with. Whether you're taming the supernatural with hero Shun'ei, sand shifting as the ominous Kukri, or boxing lyrical with the secret agent Vanessa, you'll have a unique style of play to experiment with. Better yet, you can take any character into mission mode, where you can practice a list of combos. These can range from useful combo starters into outrageously complicated chains, but offer a great way for people to master a character of their choosing. The story mode has everything you need in a fighting game campaign. Character-specific interactions, character-specific cutscenes, and some bespoke cosmic demon that's conveniently unsealed at the moment of winning the tournament to fight as a last boss. King of Fighters XV ticks all those boxes. The actual story elements are quite light, but it is appreciable to see unique interactions for every team choice you make. Furthermore, there are lengthy ending scenes unique to each team that offer some nice rewarding respite before the credits. It's great to see SNK didn't cheap out on the single-player experience. In the enormous online scene of modern times, it must be very tempting to focus on the multiplayer aspects and neglect the old-school offline player. Fortunately, SNK has served both aspects well in King of Fighters XV. It's doubtful SNK will ever revisit the jaw-dropping, pixel art beauty seen in KOF 12 and 13 for cost-budget reasons, so this polygonal approach is the new norm. While not as stylistic as the moves made by Guilty Gear, the anime-infused aesthetic sticks around, now rendered at high resolution and given a sharp HDR grading. Improvements from KOF 14 utilize the better hardware, injecting greater texture and mass to many of these characters like Ryo, whose muscles now bulge like an 80s-era pro wrestler from the height of the steroid era. This isn't a mere lift using the models from a now 6-year-old game. SNK also hasn't changed its design aesthetics when it comes to in-game physiological physics. Mai still has impossible breasts, equally impossible stick-on clothing, and unmissable bounce in her movement. Is it braver to evolve and modernize appropriately, or remain stuck in the past? Unfortunately, there is little outside the main story. Speaking of which, it is very much a blink and you'll miss it narrative, featuring seldom cutscenes and a tried and tested formula. Players fight in the KOF tournament while trying to vanquish an evil threat. It doesn't last much longer than an hour and it isn't particularly interesting. The real reward is going through it again with specific teams to unlock new cutscenes, although the likelihood of this happening is relatively slim. Much of what players will be craving is the online mode. Now featuring a rollback netcode, online matches should feel competitive. Rollback netcode is now expected in all fighting games for them to be played competitively online, so it's good that KOF 15 hasn't dropped the ball here. King of Fighters 15 offers a much deeper battle system which should appeal to players who have been a fan of the series for some time. For those wanting to play for the first time, there's a lot to take in. Thankfully, the tutorial makes all the nuances in its systems easy to understand and allows players to practice in the training room before taking the fight online. While the story mode leaves little to be desired, it is the fighting where KOF 15 is at its strongest.